How's everybody doing today? I know it's been a minute. Let me check on a few things. So I got my new restream and I'm struggling already. So let a few people fall in. You see it right there. Where is my QR code? Where's my chat at? Chat. Okay. Give me one in the chat if you can hear me. Like I said, I'm struggle streaming already. Welcome, casual economists. Welcome, Izzy. Let me make that a little bigger. You see it. We'll talk a little bit about MoveIT today. It's getting everybody hacked. So, what's up, casual economists? Glad you can join me. You know how we do. If you got any tech questions or cybersecurity questions, just put them in the box, and I'm gonna start getting going. Gonna read the article. We just talk about MoveIT, and you seen the thumbnail. And we'll talk about why so many people are using it and why so many people are getting hacked. Right. So there's a couple reasons and a couple issues with that. So happy Friday. I'm glad it's Friday, but I need it. I am dragging today. So let me make that a little bigger. And we'll just start talking about moving from that perspective. So, a little bit about me. I think most people here know who I am. I'm Professor Black Ops. I taught 10 years at a community college. I've got 30, 35 years of IT experience. I've got 15 years of cybersecurity experience. I've been everything from a programmer, DBA, web admin, a lot of stuff. Currently, what I do in cybersecurity, I am a compliance architect. I really don't know what the hell it is, but basically, when you set up your architecture, I review it for compliance. Right? Everybody's in the cloud, so I'm currently looking at Azure for GRC compliance. So what is compliance? You know, HIPAA for hospital. I do NIST because I do a lot of federal work, and I work with a lot of fintech um, clients, right, that do financial stuff, and they do federal work, right? So I usually do NIST, IRS Pub 1075, HIPAA. Those are usually the big compliances I usually work with from a federal level. All right. Currently, my 2023 goals was I've got a few AWS certifications. So I'm trying to do security in the cloud. Well, not trying, I do it, and I'm trying to do it better. So I went and got a few AWS certifications. So I I'm comfortable in the AWS cloud. So now I'm hoping to get a little more comfortable in the Azure cloud. So once again, put any questions you have, tech or cybersecurity, in the box. I'll answer them. Come back. It doesn't have to be about MoveIT. It could be GRC and compliance questions. Once again, people reach out. I looked at probably 4 resumes this month for GRCs, helping younger people or whoever actually get in there. They were talking about NIST policies and procedures. Um, Vulnerability scanning, that whole security is such a big domain though, so there's a lot of things in there that we could talk about. So but let's just talk about MoveIT from a cybersecurity perspective, and why is that particular technology getting everybody hacked, right? The number one reason for that is most companies have some kind of file transfer movement. That could be bank files, IRS files, files just to different between back and forth from companies, and a lot of governments want you to move files back and forth. So MoveIT was the product du jour, it had all the proper certifications. We're going to look at those. It had every big government federal certifications you have saying it was safe, right? So we're going to talk about what does it actually mean, right? But two, when you're talking about a nation state, how safe can you be, right? But we're going to look at some of the certifications have. We're going to go to actually their page and once again look at the certification, talk about it. Because two is, even though it has the certifications, you have to set the product correctly, right, to make sure it's secure. Even if it's in their cloud, or even if you put in AWS, you're responsible for the setup, right? So if you look at AWS or Azure, they call it shared responsibility, right? So your part of responsible is how do you set it up? Is it in a DMZ? Are you using certificates? Are you using signed certificates to make sure it's doing authorizations from a certain client, right? And you just not log in. We're gonna touch on that. Fridge, I'm about to get back with you, Fridge. I ain't forgot about you, man. I hit you up, then I got busy again, Fridge. We gonna link up soon, man. I owe you a Zoom call, Fridge. You on my list, man. Professor Black Ops, I want to get into the cloud. I don't know where to start. It's getting AWS a good start. I don't have any IT experience. AWS, I will pick any cloud. AWS is I think the 800-pound gorilla. Azure is right behind them, which is Microsoft and even Google. I will pick between AWS or Azure. Two, I would need to know your background. I mean, if you don't have any IT experience, do you got banking experience? What type of business experience you got? Depending on what type of businesses and what you're trying to go into, I think that'll kind of help pick what cloud you're in. AWS does a lot of startup and mid-sized business. Azure does a lot of government work because a lot of big companies already have Office 365 and they were doing the Outlook mail. So a lot of people go on Azure cloud for the mail, Teams, that whole infrastructure you get out the box. And one thing I'm gonna start doing is it's called low code and no code programming. You can do that in there. It's called Power Automate, and we're gonna start doing Power Scripts to help with GRC, help with doing policy acceptance, helping with NIST 800-53 vulnerabilities, helping with incident response. How would you set that up for GRC in Teams and basically SharePoint, right? Because a lot of people do GRC with spreadsheets or they buy something expensive. So we're actually going to use Teams, SharePoint, and try to do a mid-level GRC. How would you set that up? Shout out to Fridge. Like I said, once again, I got to email my man. I hit him up a couple weeks and I got busy, but PBO is going to do what he says. So we're going to actually link up on the call and talk about. Shout out to NC Worker. Definitely one of my day ones. So let's once again talk about MoveIT. We're going to read this article. Then we're going to spend on the crazy thing. This is a true story. 10 years ago, I actually did a risk assessment of MoveIT. And I said it was good. It was great. It had all these certifications. So I actually looked through the architecture. I think it's a lot better now than when I looked at it 10 years ago. It was for a very large client. So I actually looked pretty in depth in MoveIT, right? So we're going to talk about compliance versus security. Just because you compliant doesn't mean you're secure. And just because you're secure doesn't mean you mean compliance, right? So we got to try to get my favorite rap. So we got to get the best of both worlds. And we're going to talk a little bit about that after we read this quick MoveIT article. Once again, any questions or whatever, throw them in the chat. PBOs definitely go answer those questions. I'm sure a lot of people see me on Struggle Security Gabe. Shout out to Course to Keep It Techie. He the man actually brought me to YouTube. He the one that first interviewed me in the game. Check out my man Black Heights. So there's just a ton of people. I get a lot of young ladies reaching out to me, so I always send them to Women in Linux. So that was my team. So a lot of people see me around on these YouTube streets. But once again, put the questions in the chat. We're going to break it down. And let's start reading this article and figure out what's going on with MoveIT. I'm looking at that number, 400 organizations and 20 million plus people. I said for that's a class action lawsuit, right? We suing them. Somebody getting sued with that many people. So I'm surprised I haven't seen the suit. I need to Google and see if anybody got the class action lawsuit. You get 400 organizations and 200 million plus individuals hacked, right? So Once again, let's read the article. One of the most significant hacks in recent years. Yeah, it's up there. The number of victims and the cost tied to MoveIT file transfer hack continues to climb as a fallout from the massive supply chain attack enters week 7. So let's jump on that real quick. Supply chain. So what is supply chain? Supply chain is when you have software that you bought or you're renting, aka the cloud. It's in your organization. It's supply chain because you didn't write it, right? You don't really control it. You're using it. And you believe with all the certifications and the risk assessments you've done, that software is good. But on top of that, right, you create automation scripts, you creating build scripts, you creating maybe file copy movement scripts to use that software, right? So you are building, I call them scripts, I wouldn't even call them programming, around the MoveIT software. And that's one reason people bought MoveIT, so they won't have to write all those scripts. We had a ton of corn shell when I did it at DoD in 2000. We were writing a ton of moving files. We used to move about 10,000 files every month, right? For when I was working at DoD, those were our custom scripts we wrote and we had to handle, right? When you use movement, hopefully you're transferring all that expertise to the software vendor, control updates. You don't have to worry about, the new security. You expect MoveIT to handle it, right? So that's why the supply chain attack, right? It's software you're using as day-to-day. That's part of your supply chain, right? That's build real big on this 800-53 supply chain. How do you do risk assessments on software that you didn't write, but it's under your purview and your control, right? So that's definitely one of the NIST big families coming up. So in late May, Russian gang Clop, and we're going to read an article. I guess they made like $75 million just by beating up on MoveIT, right? I think we're on the wrong team. 75 million. We're going to look at that article next. Exploit a security hole in Progress Software MOVEit product suite to steal documents from vulnerable networks. As of today, the number of affected organizations is closing in on 400, includes some of the really big names. The crazy thing is, if it's 400, there's a lot of people out there that's not reporting they got hacked. So I believe it's at least 50% higher, right? So we talking about the United States Department of Energy and other federal agencies, as well as huge companies like Energy, Shell, Deutsche Bank, consulting businesses like PwC got hacked, TJ Maxx. If you go out on a D, TJ Maxx is hiring a whole team of cybersecurity people. I think they got hacked so bad, they're actually putting up their team. I always think of marginal clothes being sold at TJ Maxx. So I'm a little confused why they got trying to get one of the top security team. We might look that up. I was on Indeed. I'm always looking. I was helping some younger people look up jobs and talking about jobs. TJ Maxx is looking for a ton of, I'm talking about top security people, and they're paying them top money. When I think of TJ Maxx, I just think of slightly used clothes for some reason. Let's keep going. Some files were downloaded by an unauthorized third party. Progress notified us of the vulnerability. So that's one of the scariest things is, as a company, you don't find a vulnerability. The vendor finds it, or at worst, one of the 3-letter agencies, the FBI, CIA, HIPAA comes knocking on your door and like, we got all your files on the dark web that we've seen, right? So that's one of the worst things can happen when you're talking about incident response from a very large company. There it is, TJX on several brands, includes TJ Maxx, Marshall, HomeGoods, HomeSense, and Sierra. I still can't figure out why they're looking for the top security people. Despite being one of the compromised companies, TJX spokesman, we did not believe there was any unauthorized access to any customers or associate personnel information on TJX systems, any material impact to TJ Maxx. I did this video that was surprising me. Plus, it looks like Este Lauder. We hacking cosmetic companies, which owns more than 20 brands, was disclosed a cyber incident. The same day, Clop listed the companies on this leak site, maybe among the victims too. In July 19th, 383 organizations and over 20 million people, 20 million individuals have been compromised, according to the cybersecurity outfit Microsoft, which source is figured from breach notifications, SC filings, and other public data. Right. So that's the big deal too. A lot of people don't realize is when you get hacked now, if it's big enough, you got to put it on your SC filings because you're a publicly traded company. When you're a public traded company, what does that mean? Your stock price is going down. Right. So that's why people are, really getting serious about the cybersecurity. Let's see what my man TechRx, all these data for all hacks being collected, algorithms created to be see more patterns and no vulnerability. This is what's up, Engineering Cannabis? He changed his name. Shout out to Engineering Cannabis. We always using AI to make it better. No, you're right. AWS has got their artificial intelligence, like you said, looking through logs, looking through that data. If you look at TTPs, right? Those are techniques the big hackers use to hack. You go to MITRE. That's what you do when you go to MITRE. They have those TTPs figured out, and with artificial intelligence, you can figure out what's happening inside your logs, right? Especially when you're talking about a petabyte of logs. Shout out to Wired Security. Go check him out. I was sharing this stuff for a minute, but he blowing up now. He got thousands of users doing big things. But go check my man out. He's definitely on that hack me side, that red team. I'm strictly blue teaming though, but go check my man out. Definitely up and coming. Check out my man TechRx. Go check him out. Let's see. Let's keep reading. But yeah, so that's where cybersecurity is really picking up because they're big companies. If your data getting hacked, a lot of times your stock price is getting getting halved. Why was your stock price getting halved? Because it's going to cost you a couple $100 million when you have a big breach, right? You got 10 million records times $100, right? Because that's what you do for credit monitoring. You haven't fixed anything, found anything, right? You had about $1 billion, right? So that's why your stock price is going to get halved, right? So that's where cybersecurity is playing a big role, right? And that's why we always go back and forth about cybersecurity has a lot of open positions, but it seems like there's a lot of gatekeepers stopping people from getting in the industry, right? So if we need more people in the industry, it seems like you would be helping people get in the industry, right? Instead of blocking people, right? So that's one reason I came here to help people get into cybersecurity. Once again, I do a little GRC. I'm about to do programming, which is Purple Team. I'm gonna do a GRC inside a SharePoint using Power Apps and Power Automate. Then we're gonna take those scripts and look for security issues on how we make sure we're safe so we're not moving, right? So how would you do vulnerability for application development? Right. A lot of people call that DevOps and a lot of people call that DevSecOps, right? So those are some things I'm gonna start doing in the future. Shout out to where I do Move. Yeah, Move is wild. They took almost this year for me. Yeah, man. Depending on where you work, 3-0 day. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. So a 0 day means it's a new vulnerability. None of the virus protections knows is out there. So none of your scanners are gonna get it. Nexus is not gonna see it. Rapid7 is not gonna see it. Right. So you're gonna be scrambling. So one of my clients, like he said, was scrambling too. So since I'm on a compliance, I just tell them to fix it. I don't get to log in and fix stuff anymore. I kind of missed that. I'm debating if I'm gonna go back to engineering, but that's another thing. Let's keep reading. But as InfoSec team notes, some of the companies who MoveIT were breached provide services to many other organizations. Case in point, Clop exploited a deployment of MoveIT used by payroll service providers Zealous, whose customers included British Airways, British Communications, Boots Pharmacy chain in U.S., among others. And as a result, these companies all saw their employees' records stolen by the Russian gang via software vulnerability. So let's read that one more time. A lot of times, once again, that's that third party, right? So that's why you have to do a risk assessment on your third party. So when you say we're using Zealous for our payroll, what does Zealous use in their infrastructure, right? Most people say, okay, we're using Zealous. But if you don't know Zealous is using MoveIT, you don't know you're getting hacked and you're getting whacked and you're getting taken out, right? So that's where that third party risk assessment's real big. And I do a lot of that. I look at every software that comes into the organization. I look at, or somebody on my team look at. We look at the contracts. We look at the RFIs, request for information, and request for proposals, because like we just said here, when you using other software, even if it's cloud, that could get your company hacked. So you need to know what software once again your third party using, so you can stay abreast. So we try to say, okay, our third party is using this, it's using movement, it's using AWS, it's using the big one now is Kubernetes, right? So what database is using on the back end? Is it C Sharp? Is it Java? Right. So you need to kind of have at least a high level list to figure out if you're getting hacked or not. Right. So that's where that case in point comes. And you need to understand from a third party what you're contracting out to. And most of the time, HR and payroll is outsourced. Right. I think it was Coronas a couple of years. They got hacked so bad over Christmas they couldn't give out checks. So people had to wait like I think 60 days to get paid. Right. So part of that, and we'll talk about that later, is in your incident response and your backup plan, you need to say, okay, if our payroll provider gets hacked, how can we manually do checks, right? People want their money, especially during Christmas. So you need to, in part of your incident response, what's your backup plan? If Zealous gets hacked, do we have the payroll file? Can we manually print checks if we had to? Can we manually send this same file to another vendor and they just not print checks, or just do direct deposits for us for the bank, right? And clear that. Then once they come up, send that bank file back to, I'm calling it Zealous, right? So those are the things from a cybersecurity, right? Compliance standpoint, right? Because let's be real, we gonna get hacked. It's not a matter of what when, right? So when that happens, what do you have in place? It might not be a hack. It could be a DDoS where you just get overwhelmed, right? But you need to have backup plans too for how you're gonna get paid. And the other one that's real scary is I had a big vendor and they said if we were down for 3 months, they would furlough people with no pay. I was like, what? PBO getting paid. So they said, I don't know, everybody in this room getting paid. PBO thinking, PBO getting paid. I don't know what y'all talk about. But so as a cybersecurity person, especially as you move up the chain, those are the things you need to be thinking of. Okay, from an incident response, because obviously moving get taken out, right? So if that happens, what's our backup plan? Usually what happens is you rate the top 30 functions in your organizations, and payroll is usually, for me, it got to be in the top 5, right? PBO got to get paid. PBO chunky and like to eat. PBO need a check. So, but so we're going to get to it. So part of movement is, okay, if that happens to your organization, what's your incident response and what's your backup plan, right? So once again, and that's it's called BIA, Business Impact Analysis, and I did a video on that. We're going to talk about that in the future. But shout out to Struggle Security in the family. Wire Dog, Struggle Security, Friday Facts. So yeah, got to get paid. I think the facts was to get paid. But so yeah, we, like I said, we're going to get more in that incident response. I did some from AWS. What that would look like when you rolled over to another region, right? And that's kind of part exactly. Better go to currency exchange. I need my check. Some facts. We got to get that money, but that's things people need to think of because it's going to happen, right? Especially some kind of version. It might not even be get hacked. The new one in this is I'm gonna do a video on that, is internal threats, right? People internal to steal money, or the thing that usually it's not on purpose. If somebody put out a patch and break something, right? Now we struggling to roll back, struggling to figure it out, right? That could take your system down for a couple of weeks because somebody put out the wrong patch. But hopefully your DevSecOps, you tested all that. How do you prevent a hack when a vendor gets hacked? So how do government agencies deploy PR, Rebel? We'll talk about that. We're going to talk about that shortly. What should you do? How do you prevent that? And how do you talk about things like MoveIT? Because there was a lot of people had MoveIT that didn't get packed, and we're going to actually look at the architectural movement, and I believe some stuff in there. If my man ain't too busy, shout out to Struggle Security. See if he'll come up and we can just talk about different architecture. I know he might be with the fam. I don't want the wife to get mad at him. So, but we'll talk a little bit about architecture if you have it in the DMZ, the MoveIT, they have agents that are encrypted. So just some of my thoughts prior. It's called Zero Trust. We'll talk a little bit about that. So let's get back to the article once again. Good stuff. And here we go again. Clop exploited deployment of movement used by a payroll service provider, meaning we outsource that, right, as part of our third-party infrastructure that we got to do security assessments and do security reviews on, right? Customers like British Airways, British Communications, Booth Pharmacies in the UK, other things, got their employees' records stolen by the Russian gang. And I got the video. Clop earned over $75 million. You know, I think most of that's on movement, right? I think we're in the wrong game, right? And Microsoft, another movement users, a national student clearinghouse, partners with more than 3,500 schools in the U.S. Process belonging to 17.1 million students. So it's likely that a total number of them was victims, right? While this may not be the same league as SolarWinds, no, it's not close to SolarWinds. It's nevertheless one of the most significant hacks. I believe that the cost will be absolutely massive, including credit monitoring for millions in lawsuits out the wazoo, and that's what we were talking about. I haven't seen the class action lawsuit yet, but I'm assuming that's coming, right? I'm assuming that. Shout out to Struggle Security. See what my man saying? I'm in the middle of red team. Okay, customer FTP Services supposed to look up. And that looked vulnerable to MoveIT. The only thing that stopped us from exploiting was IP blocking. Yeah, facts. And that's what we're going to talk about. Shout out to that. Shout out to the barbecue. I'm going to use that for the barbecue fun. But he brings it up because we had secured FTPS service. And what we did is the customer had the certificate key. Those keys could only one could get to our SFTP server or our movie server, right? So you couldn't actually you could get to it, but if you didn't have one of the SSH keys, it wouldn't let you physically connect. So you would actually have to steal the key to get to to get to it, to get to the movie server to steal the data. So that was something. We're going to talk a little bit about that, and that's where your architecture comes in. Shout out to Ty. I got to get back with you on email too. I'm lacking, man. My bad. I'm in DC, so I'm a bit all good, man. All good. We can always chop it up. That's why I like to get my man Struggle Security on there. He's doing it really in the field. We both in the field really doing it, and we get to see different level of customers. Shout out to him. He's doing the big boy customers. He's doing the Bugattis. PBO's doing the Toyota Camry customers, right? So that gives you different levels of sight into this industry, right? And we both willing to help. So he's, making a big money with the big customers. PBO did that for a little bit. PBO now went down to the mid-sized customers, the little bit, the mid-size, the 100 million, Struggle be working with the $1 billion customers, right? He be working with the Bugattis. PBO just with the Toyotas and the little Camrys and work customers though, right? But the cool thing is all of them need security. They all have issues, right? Different level of issues, right? So they're all out there getting hacked, I would say, after move. Bad guys been working on first movie 0 Day 5. That's the sad they play. That is so true, Wire Dog. And I think that's what we gotta, I guess, figure out how to work it better. But two is I think I'm gonna call MoveIT kind of like a black swan. I think the same with the big ones. I think it happens like every other year. You have this huge hit. So I don't think it's I don't think it's a lot of time. I think, like you said, it gets a lot of media, but when it happens, it's pretty big. The sad part about it is I wouldn't even call it Black Swan anymore. It happens so normal, right? Shout out to Chaos Rain. Go check him out. Let's see. Struggle Security. Forgot a brother. Don't be too hard on him, Ty. He got the little baby, man. He got the little baby. Shout out to Struggle. So let's keep reading. Once again, it's not as big as SolarWinds, I don't think. But Microsoft third analyst Brett Callows told the registry the cost will be massive. We talked about that lawsuit out the wazoo. Progress Software is facing multiple lawsuits claiming poor security led to MoveIT. Okay, let's 13. Well, let's go and put that in the tab. We might peruse on that next. To make it worse, the potential for misuse of the stolen information is significant. It's not only how Clop may misuse the information that concerns. Once it's released online, it becomes available to a global community of cyber miscreants. I like that word, cyber miscreants, to use BEC, that's business hacks and identity fraud. Progress declined to comment on how many organizations have been affected. So we remain focused on supporting our customers. Reports suggest that frequent and transparent updates has been helpful in encouraging customers to rapidly apply fixes as released. We continue to work on with industry-leading cybersecurity experts to investigate the issues, and we take appropriate response measures. We're going to look at why they were so popular, why they're still popular in the Fed space and big companies. You go on their website, and we're about to look at this shortly. They had all the certifications, all the big compliances, HIPAA, FedRAMP, SOC 2. So they had all that. So the big companies obviously thought it was safe. They thought they had my ex-boss used to call it the good housekeeping seal. I hate that term, but he used to call it the good housekeeping seal. So I'm interviewing him. He's a CIO for a major large state agency. So try to get him in for an interview. What's going on in my light? I got to keep kicking. To our knowledge at the time, none of the vulnerabilities discovered after the main vulnerability has been exploited. There have been others since the end of the month. So it's one of them was SQL Injection. Despite the growing vulnerabilities, are doing a decent job of remediating the MoveIT bugs, according to cybersecurity. The number of organization vulnerabilities 2032 has dropped such that at least 77% of the originally effective organizations are no longer vulnerable. That's one big thing we talk a lot about. And I got in discussion is that's why you use large companies, because you pay for security, and they do give you patches for their vulnerabilities, right? Even though they're late, they're on top of it. They have organizations big enough to handle that and do that, right? So that's one reason you want to have paid support. So when there's issues like that, they're usually getting the vulnerabilities out, getting the patches out, getting everything fixed, following up with large security companies, because everybody's jumping on there. So they do seem to be trying to fix the vulnerabilities. I would say in a timely manner, but Wire Dog said it was 2 years, so I don't know if I would call that timely, right? So I saw Cyber and LinkedIn for Progress a couple weeks. Yeah, that big. I'm just surprised TGX. Go look at Indeed. We might look at TJ Maxx. Got a ton of cyber guys. I just never thought about that. So let's keep reading on that. Let's see. 56% originally affected, so they ain't locking them out. Let's read it. However, he added these types of intrusions mean threat actors can play that card once for each attack. After downstream victims are compromised, the well dries up, and the adversaries have to move on to the next attack. Right. So whether or not it be attacks like MoveIT transfer example, or even past high intrusion for Kaseya's ransomware incidents or SolarWinds exploits, all of these attacks have a certain supply chain aspect that absolutely expands the potential number of victims, bleeding in the downstream organization. So if you look at NIST, I'm a NIST guy. Third-party assessments is the new thing really in 2023. How do you go about them? How do you do them? And how do you handle them? Right. So those are some of the issues. So let's look at that Clop real quick. Talk about they made $75 million just hacking on MoveIT. I mean, I think we're on the wrong team now. I'm just playing. So Clop gang to earn over $75 million from MoveIT extortion attacks. Even the government tells you don't pay extortion attacks. People pay them because a lot of times you don't have backups. You don't have your data rolling over to another region, right? And a lot of times too, if your data is automatically rolling over another region, especially if it's for because you get too many hits. If you get too many hits, too much traffic, it rolls over, and not for incident. You're gonna have your vulnerability is gonna be in both of your regions, right? So they're gonna be able to hack both of your regions. So a lot of times before you roll over a region, you got to figure out from MoveIT what do you need to from a vulnerability, what you need from a patch test to make sure you're secure. So when you roll over to the new region, you're not having the same problem with the hackers taking over. So that's one times when you say, okay, I'm in multiple regions and I can automatically roll over. But if you have the same movement in the second region, you're gonna have the same problem, right? So that's why sometimes before you roll over to your new region, right, you want to make sure you got the new patches, you're up to date, and MoveIT theoretically says you're good right before you do that. I think a lot of people miss out on that. Clop Game is expected to earn between 75 and 100 million from extorting victims of their massive MoveIT data campaign. A new report released, Cover explains that the number of victims paying ransomware has fallen to a low of 34%, causing ransomware gangs switching strategies to make their attacks more profitable. Explains the different extortion attacks having various opportunities reflected by the amount of effort and investment required to conduct the attack compared to other attacks. Right, so that shows you cyber extortion opportunity, cost curve, phantoms, DB deletion spraying, network access, device encryption, data exfiltration, and ransomware. It's where you get your money, right? Because you got their data. They know they can't get their data. And if they give you, because I think Kaseya's, I think was 10 million. They asked for 10 million. I think the government ended up getting it back. Somehow they traced the Bitcoin. But if you got a $1 billion company and 100 million get your data back, right, and you continue to operate, question always, should you pay it? Right. So that's the answer. The chart shows its tax from the lowest complexity and automation has to the least impact on victims and the cost to hackers. So I'm just kind of fluid. Cloud ransomware gang been widespread data theft attack exploits a 0-day vulnerability in MoveIT secure file transfer platform. These attacks are expected to impact hundreds of companies. We just talked about that. Having already notified affected customers over the past 2 months. Like my man Wirestrike said, it's been going on like for a couple years, like undercover. This shows you the exfiltration. Once again, I'm going to put these links inside the description. I haven't done it yet. I'll make sure I do it. Let's see. As a result, smaller ransomware operations such as Dharma and Vovas have seen a decrease in their 37%. Right. I think the sad part is we're getting better at security, but what happens is when you get the big vendors, they leave you wide open. So even though we're getting better, when a big attack happens, it just gets so much media. The numbers are just crazy. See what my man said. So was the attack point to SQL database, or was it a way to track the data? It looks like one of the track engineering cannabis was SQL injection. Once I looked, I perused it, I didn't dig down. There was 5 vulnerabilities. One of them was SQL injection. One of them was I said they was calling it data exfiltration because of access privilege. I think you could take over their web server that was in a DMZ. And once you took over their web server, basic username, you could upscale the privileges to take it over. So there was like 5 different attacks. They made back facts. We're on the wrong team, wire dog. Fact. So I used to joke, man. I know guys that was in the wrong game. I'm like, dude, y'all doing that, man. You can steal 100 million from your basement if you get enough. SQL attack that could lead to RCE. Wasn't about 4 attacks on the wire dog? I thought it was like 4 or 5 CVEs when I looked at it. You would think SQL injection's been out so long, you would think you would have validation that will block just basic SQL attacks. So that's the sad part. OWASP's top 10 has been the same, just different positions for the last 20 years. SQL injection's been on there. Misconfiguration's been on there for a decade. So probably 10 of those things has been on the OWASP top 10, once again, that purple team, web server security. Shout out to my man Alpha CyberDog. He's got a free class on LinkedIn for API security. So I always put SQL injection and kind of API together because you're making calls. So it was 3 different ones. Okay. I just perused. I was referring to the first one. Yep, no, that's cool. I thought it was 5, but I need to go back and check. I know it was more than one, so they were all kind of different in how you would take. But that's the sad part. When this happened, I just did a blog explaining the first. Yeah, I might have to go check her out. I just don't look at them like that pretty much anymore. I just got to look them up, and operations usually on them. From a compliance standpoint, right? I usually track them, make sure they get completed. Do a POAM, which is a schedule of when can we have them complete. Because a lot of times too is customers of ours are asking if we're using their product, right? So that's kind of what happens when you use third party. So let's actually look at the product's website. Let's look at some of what I believe are some of the top security certifications, I'm calling them, in that industry. So let's look at it real quick. Like I said, I looked at this 10 years ago, and they had so this is MoveIT. Once again, IP switch is one. MoveIT Cloud, managed securely, right? So this is what they're talking about. Eliminate time, manage software security updates, best in class. So they give you how to reduce the risk of data and lawless and non-compliance, right? So manage and secure. Eliminate time spent managing software and security updates. Let our experts on maintaining the best of class cloud deployment. With MoveIT Cloud, manage file transfers, stay current on the latest security updates and layer of defense, including FIPS 140-2 certified encryption. So for me, that's huge. So what is FIPS 140-2 certified? Usually it's AES. It's usually the government actually looked at the certification of the cryptography to make sure it's done right. I see a lot of guys in open source say they're doing AES 256 right, but when you open up and look at the code, they're not doing it right? They're not doing encryption. They're not doing the 16 terms. They're not doing the secret key pass correctly in AES, right? There's a ton of stuff that makes AES secure. If you do some of it's wrong, it won't be correct. So when the government looks at it, they gives it this certification, FIPS 140-2. Now the new one's FIPS 140-3 means they looked at that cryptography and verified that it was done correctly, right? Once again, as part of GRC, our job is to say, okay, do they have the right certifications to say this software is good? And the government's looked at it, right? So that's one of the big ones. We say, oh, you got that? You looking good, man. You top of breed. You could be top of breed and still get hacked, though, right? So yeah, definitely. I'm sure there's still a bunch of orders. So yep, that patching. You got to stay on that patching. So from a compliance standpoint, once again, that's one of the things I look for. Once again, I do NIST and federal work, and a lot of the big guys say you need that certification, right, before you can do work for the government, right? So obviously they had it. They still got hacked, but that's something that you looked at, right? We might download a data sheet and look at it, right? Transfer simple, right? There it goes, 142. We're looking for AES. That's one of the few cryptographies we believe in the United States that hasn't been hacked, right? I like to see AES. I like to go a little higher, 512, 1024, 2048, right? The longer the key, the hardest to break, right? We know quantum computer is coming. That's going to make all this stuff irrelevant. But right now, right, we want the bigger key. We want to see the FIPS 140-2 validation, and we want to see that you got the AES 256 one. We believe one of the few cryptographs that has not been cracked. Enables secure in collaboration. All right, so they giving you all the good stuff. Ad hoc, secure photo sharing. Got the MoveIT client. Look at all these data protection certifications. PCI, that's for credit cards, right? HIPAA, that's Health and Hospital, right? So when you go in there, CCPA, that's California Protection Privacy Act. CPR, I believe, is the Virginia one. GDPR, that's Europe. That's one of the top hard privacy act. So MoveIT has all the good FIPS. It's got the PCI. It's got the HIPAA. It's got the CCPA. It's got the CPR. We even so secure. Europe's coming. We got the GDPR. Still got hacked though, right? So that's what I mean. That's why all the big companies were using it. In the old days, they said if you use IBM, you would be good. Nowadays, if you have these certifications and regulations, check, you're supposed to be good. And like I said, this product had all the big guys, right? Right? Yeah, they got them all, right? So from a GRC perspective, now I usually do a little more in depth, and we're going to actually look at the architecture, some things you could put in to help you hopefully not get hacked. Like you said, from a WireDog had the SQL injection in there, and so did Engineering Cannabis, aka TechRx. You could put especially AWS, they have a firewall that when you do SQL injection, it looks for those type of queries that look suspicious. So AWS WAF, Web Application Firewall, will block it. Azure has the same product. Their firewall probably would have blocked that, right? So there's things you can put around it, right, to make it more secure, right? We're going to touch a little bit on the architecture. Let me know if y'all want to go deep into architecture, just talk about it, just touch on it. But from a compliance standpoint, you see it. PCI, HIPAA, CCPA, Cali, CPR, I believe the Virginia, and GDPR, right? That's Europe, right? So they have, like my man said, they got them all. But still, that's why we still need incident response. We still need to be proactive. So in case something happens, we have our contingency plan on how we're going to move, how we're going to get people paid if it's HR, right? If it's file movement, how we're going to block that and do files a different way, right? So that happens and you're a big organization. You could block movement, and for those files have to go, you can actually put a workspace in Teams. It's all encrypted, and theoretically, you're not moving files. You're uploading and downloading from a web server. So it's streaming there and streaming back. Hopefully, you have TLS 1.3, right? And hopefully have that. Let's go deep and see where. Let's go deep. All right, I'll try to pull up one of those and we'll see what's going on. I'm about to drop the link in a minute. Somebody wants to come up. So we're going to scale, right? So I've actually had clients tell me we want to get rid of our homegrown people were doing it in Java. People were doing it in C#. People were doing it in straight corn shell scripts. I've seen them all kind of way. So people want to say, we want to take our homegrown scripts that we don't know if it's secure. We don't know if we can maintain them. We don't know this. We want to move to a cloud product that has all the right certifications that we believe is good, right? So that's the selling point. And it's really a great selling point too, but obviously, sometimes you have problems. Once again, there you go. You see the big certs right there. We got the SOC 2 Type 2. We got the PCI. We got the HIPAA High Tech. That's high trust for health and hospitals. GDPR, one of the toughest regulations, right? Once again, you got those big, and that's why all those companies were on MoveIT, right? You tell you, we got the SOC 2, and we got the PCI. Once again, we got the HIPAA, we got the High Tech, right? So that's where companies think they're safe. They pay big money. MoveIT is not cheap, right? When you take MoveIT and they charge you by the agent, so depending on how many files you move, right? So, but once again, from a GRC, governance, risk, and compliance, these are the things you like to see to say, okay, the big companies checked them. The big shout out to Struggle Security. The big consulting companies has validated these products, and all the big guys are using it. So the little guys, we just need to jump on board and salute the flag, right? We're good to go. So that's one reason why that was it. Implement secure controls. You got the audit trails. That's part of NIST and anything. Once again, we got they got even more. Right? We got the ISO 2701. We got the BASEL one. I don't even know what that is. The GLB bank. That's Graham Leach Bliley. ITAR is if you're moving weapons overseas. So they got everything covered. All right. So if you're moving weapons, you got to have the ITAR. I think that's the Fed Consumer Agency. So And two is why I touch on this is from a GRC, when you understand these compliances, right? That's how you make money. Because like Graham Leach Bliley, financial institution, GDPR, you overseas, PCI, credit cards. If you're moving credit cards, FISMA, you're doing DoD work or high level government work, right? So you need to understand what these checks are and how they apply to different products to make sure they're good, right? So but I guess you said, well, is all that stuff really matter? Does that really mean you're good? Yeah, it still really means you're good, right? It means that a nation state, which Clop is, attacked them and found a vulnerability, right? There's different levels to hacking, different levels to security, right? You got script kiddies, middle guys, hacktivists, nation states, internal attacks. So there's different levels to hacking, right? I think I'll let Wired Dog chime in on that. He do more hacking. I think Clop is a nation state. I think it was taken advantage by a nation state. So you at the top of the pyramid with those guys, right? It ain't no couple guys, young guys in their boxers in their basement that got you, right? You got attacked by a nation state, right? Then over there talking about secure email. How would you keep it secure? Move it client, secure folder. You can use Outlook admin. Once again, they had all the extensions and all the things you think you would need in a bigger company. They got the automation too. So what's automation? A lot of times is your program might be doing a file. I've seen a lot of bank files in my time, insurance files. I used to work at a Fortune 500 insurance company. They move files for claims, third-party claims, hospital bills. Most times, that's a big flat file at night, right? And movement's going to move it, right? So a lot of times you can encrypt the file. Once again, get keys. I'm about to hopefully find a quick architectural diagram where we can start breaking it down so we can go in depth. Let's see if this data sheet. That was my bad. I should have had one. I had a small one lined up. Let's find a quick. So let's look at the victims real quick, then we'll touch on we'll find an architectural diagram real quick and talk about different ways to lock it down. So we talked about at least 13 lawsuits. I haven't seen those. They said at least 13 lawsuits accuse those. I probably look those up later. Like you said, patching in the last 48 hours. Did they name some? Long-term significant personal data was exposed, damage to business employees. Leaked data can be fodder for future attacks targeting individuals. Life insurance company Genworth Financial says hackers accessed the data of 2.5 to 2.7 million customers and insurance agents, including social security numbers. Genworth was one of 6 suppliers that informed Colorado State University that it was affected by MoveIT exploit. Once again, that's what we're talking about, right? Colorado is using it as a third party for their insurance to Genworth. Genworth got my man Deion Sanders hacked. Man, I hope Deion Sanders is okay, man. We know he having a little foot problems. We hope his data didn't get stolen. Shout out to Prime Time, right? So, let me switch over. I forgot to switch. Let me see. I did see. Let's see what my man said. I think so too. A certain Russian-speaking country probably has them protected as long as they don't have their citizens. No, I agree with that. A lot of those big companies, like you said. Let's look at that other one real quick with the Genworth, with the victims. I was supposed to forgot to switch it right there. Life company Genworth hacked 2.5 to 2.7 million customers, including social security numbers. And once again, down here. Here, Genworth was 6 empires that informed Colorado State University that it was affected by movement. Remember, Colorado was using Genworth insurance, right? And Genworth got Colorado. Shout out to Deion Sanders. Hopefully he didn't get affected. We know my man's having a few foot problems at Colorado. Is it Colorado State University or Colorado University? Well, we see it. But let me find a quick architectural diagram. And my thumbnail had one on it. Let me bring up my thumbnail real quick and we can, let's see. Thumbnail. here we just start here. Let's see. So let's just start a straight. Make that a little bigger. I only got one screen. Make sure y'all can see it. So let's see, right? So this is a standard 3-tier. So we got our DMZ, meaning this traffic right here is shared from both outside. Then our secure network is our corporation, but hopefully there's more separation back there, more subnets. But we're gonna start off with this, right? So usually there's a file server inside the DMZ, which right the outside can get to, the outside can ping. Then there's agents on mainframes, network shares, FTPS servers, secure servers, and email servers. Right? They had connectors for all of these, and all of these theoretically we saw would be the AES encryption, TLS 1.3. Right? So all this data theoretically would be encrypted. So if somebody got back to like a Russian state and started listening, you wouldn't be able to see it. The MoveIT file server in the middle is where you put your files, then you go grab it, or this right here pushes it back to your secure network. Right? So nobody on the internet could actually get back to your secure network. Right? You're going to put it on your file server, then your MoveIT's going to push it back, or you're going to come and get it. Right? So the question is, from the SQL injection part, right? I believe, like I said, I need to double check though. The MoveIT server had a web interface on a push service. They did SQL injection, right? So they could get to that server, move it and push it, right? To put extra stuff on the server or get your information that wasn't yours on that server, right? Because sometimes when you do SQL injection, you can query stuff. Sometimes in SQL injection, you can move up and down folders using SQL commands, right? I've done it in Oracle a bunch of times, right? So your SQL command, you put what directory or what file locations you're at. Then if you can up your privileges, you can move up and down that file transfer before those files are moved to actually steal their information. So I believe reading, like I said, I just read one of the CVEs. My man Wire said there was 3. I thought there was 5. I read one of them, so that's what I read and how they were moving. So the question is, how can you prevent that, right? If you were doing SQL injection, right, that means you have a client on the internet. So on your client, you can actually put a certificate saying only this client can attach to this server for this directory. For me, it doesn't seem like it did that. It seemed like they were connecting with keys or they were doing file transfers. It seemed like it wasn't doing authentication from a specific web server to that. Right? So, 2, that means they stole somebody's credentials or did a man in the middle attack, right? Grab the session, then use the SQL injection because that session was automatically authenticated, right? But I got to be like my man Wire Dog. What's her name? He said the lady that was actually doing the hacks on there, Huntress. I've looked at her a couple of times. Like I said, I'm a blue team guy, so my job is defending. So from that position, I would have keys. I would only have certain 2 part of that certificate. And also part of that is I would say, because each one of these companies, they have public IP. So I would only say these public IPs with this cert can only get to this MoveIT server in this different directory, right? So I needed to go back and do research to see if they had that. Of course, we call it defensive depth, security on your part, right? You have different levels of security, right? So if you have the certificate and you saying I'm only accepting IPs from these companies, it makes it a lot harder to do SQL injection or get on there and start transversing files because I'm looking for a certain IP range and I'm looking for certain certificate range, right? So from the internet to the DMZ, Those are the extra levels of security. And let's start out with the number one thing too is that subnet and the DMZ should have made you do an MF call to your phone or some organization. So those are the three layers from a blue team guy I would want, especially going forward, right? I would want you to have a certificate. I'm specifically checking the IP range of your company, right? Because 9 times out of 10, when they're going out a proxy server, that proxy server has a range of X that's only used by that company. Right, so I got the cert, I got the IP arranged, and when you hit this subnet inside that DMZ, you got to do a MFA call. All right, so you can do MFA push, you can MF select pound, but I'm having MFA call on there, right? Because a lot of times these are automated jobs, so you're not putting a username and password. A lot of times you're doing a certificate. So either Russia sold the certificate or they spoofed that certificate. But once again, you got to spoof the certificate. You got to spoof the IP range. Then you have to spoof the MFA coming from that specific subnet of that DMZ. Right. So those were the three things coming from the internet to the DMZ that I would implement. Let me know if that makes sense. I'm rambling this off the top of my head. So I'm doing this live. But once again, I've been in the game for 15 years. So once again, from the internet, I'm looking for the certificate. A lot of times, if you're doing automated jobs, that's how you're actually authenticating. I would do MFA. And you can do MFA with automated jobs. I think I need to do a YouTube video on that. They show you how to do that on AWS, right? So once again, I got the cert, I got the IP range, then the MFA. Even for automated jobs, you can do MFA. So those are the three things. Now, if I was going forward and I was considering still using MoveIT, I will make sure I would have those three things added to it. Then let's talk about MoveIT pushing files or you coming to get files. I would do the same. I would have the same things in there. Even though 99 times I know this is my subnet, I would only let these machines only grab for a certain IP range that I know MoveIt's on, right? So I know you're not getting spoofed or authenticated on. The second part of that, once again, I would do the certificate to automatically log on to MoveIt. A lot of times we don't force authentication because it's inside our back-end network. I still will make it authenticate. And two is the logs. A lot of times Russia, when they hit, especially SQL injection, they're trying to grab big files. As part of your artificial intelligence, right? You should have a baseline of the size of files you usually move on a certain day and a certain night, right? If you usually move in 100 meg file, why you got a 5 petabyte file trying to go out there? Right. So if that file was stolen trying to come out as a larger size from a monitoring standpoint, anything bigger than 100 meg, that's probably 5 times the size of a normal file going out. I would block that file, block that port. I would shut all the ports off until you figured out what's going on. So those are some of the things I would add to movement or add to any file movement process you break. The big ones, though, going in right over to the MFA, make sure I was looking for the IP, and automated jobs usually have certificates. So I would make sure, once again, and two is even for the manual people, I would make them log on and pass the certificate and do MFA, right? And so I would do that with all my automated jobs, just coming from a blue team security check, just off the top of my head, what I would add to movement once again to make that. And we do some future videos on that in AWS to show how do you create a certificate, how do you double check the IPs of a company that's logging in on, right? So coming in this directory, you can say only IPs from this specific company could log into this particular movement and in this particular directory, right? So say Russia spoofed the key, but they were coming from a different IP range, you would automatically block them. Let's be realistic. I'm sure WireDog does this. Spoofing IPs aren't hard. Right? That's not a hard thing to do, but once again, you got multi-layer, right? You got the certificates, you got the IPs, then you're gonna have the MFA, right? So those three together, you would hope they would go somewhere else, right? And pick another companies that's easier to do, right? But a lot of times too is I get pushed back on operations because now they're asking me, is that too much security for the value of the files we moving, right? So you got to make that, you got to balance that, right? People like NC Worker, Wire Dog, Keep It Techie, Struggle Security, TechRx, Todd. People have jobs to do. A lot of times is you can have so much security, it's hard to do your job. But with movement, what they said, lost $100 million, it's easy to get stuff approved where people stealing $100 million, right? So once again, give me a shout out if that made sense. Once again, I'm running that. I am running that off the top of my head. Like I said, I've done that. I've done pieces of that at an organization. That's the link if you want to come up and chop it up. I've done pieces of that at an organization. I have not done all of that at one time for one transfer. Like I said, in these, when you're moving $100 million and you get $100 million stolen, so maybe that's what for the future. I think you're going to need to once again security in depth, do multiple things, make sure you're secure, making sure what's happening. Let me know. Let's see. Oh, my man. Oh yeah, definitely. I was researching one malicious IP. It was registered, but the company. See, yeah, facts, man. That's common too. Yeah, like you said, Wired Dog. Yeah, that's so common. Like you said, oh, definitely. I was researching one malicious IP. It was registered in the United States, but the company domain was out of Russia. And Russia, we know, Russia's got a ton of IP. China's the one really the sneakiest, right? They do a lot of work in the US and they got a lot of malicious stuff moving around there. And so that's kind of stuff you kind of got to figure out. So the thing you would hope is the malicious IP was not in the range of the company that should be in um, using your service, right? So the IP was malicious. It was in the United States, but if it wasn't one of your clients' IPs, you should be blocking it, right? So that's the thing. A lot of times we don't block them. We just say, oh, they're coming in, they got the certificate, they're good, right? Once again, they could have hacked them, they could have social engineered them, right? So that's why you want to have that multiple level security, right? And a lot of times, shout out to Struggle Security, when you do the DISA right? Security technical implementation guidelines, they give you checks like that, right? You need to make sure you're using the company IP address. You need to make sure you're using a cert. Your cert needs to be 1024 bit long, all right? You need to be using MFA, all right? You need to be using session tokens inside AWS, meaning when that session starts, I know it starts right when it starts, it ends, right? So I don't have to worry about a hacker jumping on that session because it stayed open, right? So, and two is how do you make sure that session is controlled by, once again, the IPs that start that session, right? Because a lot of times you get man in the middle attacks, right? So how do you do those checks? And once again, too, is and I said this, I developed applications for 10 years. I done Oracle for 15 years. I did Java with Oracle for 15 years. I did Spring Hibernate, which is a programming stack. I did. So I understand those concepts from a programming standpoint, and they call it purple team. How do you do application security going into movement, right? So when you really talk about this, half of this is application security. How are you doing your SQL injection, right? How are you doing your SQL call so they're not SQL injection? Once again, do we want to use a WAF? A WAF will block SQL injections because it's going to make sure each one of those items are validated. So hopefully, depending on how they're doing the SQL injection. But WAF inside AWS, the cheapest one, I think is like $4,000 a month, right? So most people can't afford that. So how could you put a cheaper WAF? Could you do an open source WAF, Snort or something like that in front of it? And we'll talk about how to use open source with the cloud to come out with a cheaper version until you make money, until you can afford. Once again, AWS WAF, I think it's $3,500 or $4,000 a month, right? Most small companies, especially if you're learning, you're not going to spend that, right? So, but once again, that's the GRC part, getting your skills together so you can understand from security's multiple layers, right? That's the purple thing on the back, infrastructure, right? How do you have your infrastructure in the back? So if somebody gets on a file transfer, they can't get to your specific security segment on the back end, right? Because we usually have our own segment for each agency or sub company in the back or division, right? So if you get that file server for that directory, if that's the HR directory, you shouldn't be able to get to the programmer directory or DevOps directory or the manufacturer directory, right? So how do you make sure only that directory from a infrastructure standpoint gets back there, and how do you validate that SQL injection or that SQL statement is good before you get in the back, right? So, and I did a video on that, and we'll redo it. How do you do different subnets that's going to validate that call in the back end? Hopefully, so it's not SQL injection. Hopefully, that session has been validated with a token, so you know it's good to go back there, and somebody else didn't jump on it and take over, right? So those are just different level of security from blue team, right? And a little purple team, that's application security. We can talk about the colors later, but different level of security, right? And different level of issues you're gonna have when you're moving, right? So once again, so when you have moving in your infrastructure, from a GRC, we looked at it. It had all the good stuff. It had the FIPS 140-2. It had HIPAA. It had SOC 2 Type 2. It had ITAR if you're moving military equipment for guns and stuff, right? So theoretically, all the big agencies and big companies vetted said it was good, right? But now, right, you still have to architect it correctly, right? Because even in their cloud, you have options to, I mean, they give you best practices, but to share responsibility. So, how do you architect it from a security person to make sure it's secure, right? This is the standard, right? Call it 3 tier, all right? You got the DMZ, you got the security network coming from the internet, the open source, from the open source, right? But once again, what are you going to add it to? Add a cert. We're going to double check to make sure those IPs are the same one. The client cert should only go with certain IPs. Then two is we're going to MFA when you come in there, right? So now, once again, we have that layer of security, those 3 different layers to help you protect from your movement, your MoveIT getting hacked, right? Then even once you get movement and you come here to get your file or your file pushed, how do you make sure only the file is getting pushed? How do you validate that nothing was changed in the file to put malware in there or some other connection? How do you validate? We know we're going to do a virus protection before it actually writes to that. But once you write it and it is an end of file marker, the end of file marker is there. Or are you going to push it back? Or are you going to go get it? We usually like to, I like the clients to actually go get the file. Because if you push it there and it's a virus, the MoveIt's going to automatically push it right there, right? So I like, because before I go get it, even from an automated job, I can virus scan it again. Hopefully, when the file came in, the customer did a hash of the file, so we know nothing has been added to the file. So when they put the hash with the file, when I come get it, I'm going to rehash the file, check it to the hash the client did. So hopefully nobody from Russia added anything in the file before I pull it back, right? So those are some additional checks, right? Because once again, you want to have a security in depth approach, right? We got these 3 extra checks here, 2 more checks there. Hopefully we beat Russia and Clop didn't get us, right? But those are things you got to add to it. And those from a security architect, security analyst, right? There's so many names for it, right? Security engineer, right? I think I'm a compliance engineer. I need to look at my title. But so once again, just hitting a couple parts. Let me know if that makes sense. Let us know if you want to keep talking. I want to give NC Worker just a little dab into the little deep. The only deeper if I go, we have to actually move it down and actually start looking inside this code, right? But I've seen scripts written for MoveIT I didn't think were very well, right? So that's where your DevOps, because in your automation, you still have to write some scripts to help move it, some things create a cert. It's not going to do that for you, right? This shared responsibility. So your coding, once again, has to be secure and tight. And make sure your DevOps procedures are good. But once again, this is a diagram, and from a security expert, and even any expert, this is kind of where you want to start. And two, like again, what security elements or CI configuration items do you want to add to MoveIT from the front end and the middle end, right? And from the DMZ, right? I always validate this customer is coming from this IP address, can only get to this directory. Right now, once again, we know you can spoof IP address. We know you can get a cert. We know with the golden ticket, a lot of MFA's been hacked, right? But that's three things you would have to actually hack and attack and to be successful at it, right? To actually, especially from a SQL injection part, to make that file movement take off. So I guess the interesting thing is, obviously, a lot of those companies didn't have it, and those were $100 million mistakes, Clop has said. So the question is why those companies didn't have those extra layer of security elements in to hopefully prevent this from happening. Right. I know a couple clients said they had it and they didn't get hacked, right? So I believe they had extra, like we just talked about, security measures in. I guess in this time and era, do you need to go the extra mile to make sure it's not a $10 million mistake, or depending, it could be $100 million mistake. If you got 10 million customers, $100 in credit monitoring, right? You can easily get up in a billion. And we're going to have struggle security come in. They bill rates be crazy for the big consulting company. I seen junior people with $250 bill rates. They just came out of college. I'm like, oh yeah, we ain't paying that. We ain't paying that, right? So those big companies, that's what they do. Oh, let's see what's going on with my little light. So let's see with those big companies. So I'm gonna hang out a little longer. I dropped the link if anybody want to come up, or if you got any more questions, I'm gonna hang out for a little bit. It could be anything IT, cybersecurity, drop them in. But I think MoveIt's going to be a good test case, and I think that's at a high level what it is. I'm working with a few clients, and we always go, we call it postmortem. When somebody big is hacked or this happens, what do we have in place so we won't be next, right? So any of our file movement, okay, we're going to need the cert. We're going to need make sure we're only taking a certain IP ranges that goes with these certs. And we're going to do MFA, even for automation, right? And we'll talk about that. Once again, AWS, you can do a temporary cert that acts like MFA. So you generate it. So when the automation runs, it grabs the temporary cert like MFA. And the automation, the MFA is the temporary cert getting pushed to it, like came from your phone. It's coming from AWS. So that's their version of automation for MFA, right? So you can do it even in automation. So, but once again, you as a person, you as a company, you just getting better needs to kind of just like again, we like to walk through. Okay, so this won't happen, and this doesn't have to be for movement. Any file movement you're doing, even if it's internal, even if you're pushing out code, it's part of file movement, right? You could be working off site, pushing it to a movement, and a movement pushing the code. So if that's your DevOps, how are you? Of course, you would sign the code will be your certificates. How would you do that for a DevOps issue? Because really, you jarring up code, right? Tarring it up, right? You still have the same movement problems. It's just internally. So how would you make sure that you wouldn't get hacked internally, right? So those are some of the things from a cybersecurity thing, and that's one thing I'm working on. I think I'm gonna do a data privacy class, and part of data privacy I'm going to do is reviewing code and security architectures for compliance, like we saw there, GDPR, PCI, right? So that's part of data privacy, right? So we make sure the data is moved right, encrypted right. Then operations, security engineering will set up the back end, right? We would just validate how they set it up to make sure it meets certain requirements, right? So I think I'm gonna do a shout out to Keep It Techy. They challenged me to do a course, so I think I'm gonna do a data privacy course. There's so many other good courses out there. Shout out to Tech G. Shout out to Master IT. Shout out to Keep It Techy's Linux course. There's so many good courses out there. I'm old. I didn't want to make sure I wasn't stepping on anybody's toes, so I was gonna do something a little different. I think data privacy along with GRC is a kind of hot topic a lot of people aren't used to. It's a little different. And once again, it's super hot now, especially with stuff like this, especially with GDPR, CCPA. You saw all that. All that's really data privacy, right? This sits tangential or adjacent to cybersecurity. They have their own cyber checks that they're bringing to the game. I'm gonna do a CCPA video, California privacy law. Then I'll probably do an AWS. How do you set up AWS to be CCPA compliant? So once again, I'm just gonna hang out a little longer. Put any questions in there. Hopefully, NC Worker, that was deep enough. I try to put my whole foot in it, not my toe. Put my foot in it a little bit. Let me know. Let me know. Too, if you want a certain video, just drop them in there. Like I said, I'm getting my video stacks. I'm gonna start doing a few more AWS. I'm gonna get back on my AWS grant. I got my search and took a little time out, so now I'm about to get on my AWS. I start doing Docker and probably Kubernetes. Shout out to Women in Linux. I'll probably do some joint with them. Tim's definitely better at me than Kubernetes than I am. I'm just getting my toe in Kubernetes, and that's 2 containers. That's the next big security thing. Everybody's doing Docker or Kubernetes containers. Fargate, that's the serverless part of containers. It's ECS and EKS is their serverless part of containers. So from a security perspective, like third party, how would you review that to do security in the cloud, right? So we're going to touch on that. Once again, I'm just hanging out to see if there's any more questions. I'm glad everybody joined me. I've been taking a little time off. PBO been tired. Shout out to my man. I'm gonna email him right now. Fridge, yeah, Fridge done hit me up on a PBO, Professor Black Ops at gmail.com. I'll definitely set up. We'll do it right here. It won't be obviously won't be live. We do it in my little restream, be a private conversation, and we just chat it up. I went over a couple people's resumes for GRC. I just told them they need to be a little more specific, so we can chat it up and talk about different things. And I'm going to send you to. I used to give you overview. If you're a red team, I'm going to send you to struggle security. He's red team, he everything team, right? Linux, Kubernetes. I should probably send you to Women in Linux. You getting started? I'll probably send you to Tech G or Master IT. Linux. Definitely got to see my man. Keep it techie. Sales. I'm definitely Black Heights. I'm thinking about getting into tech sales. I've been doing tech sales. I need to get some of that money. I'm starting to actually understand most of the street heights. That's cool. Let me know, casual economist. And I've been working on that. If I say something and it's an acronym, just tell me to ask me what that acronym is. I've been working on that. I'm glad you mentioned that, casual. And I'm bad about that because I worked Fortune 500. I worked at DOD for 10 years. I worked for the Department of Revenue for a very large state. So we just talking acronyms. So I've been doing it for 20 years. The crazy thing is when I first started at DOD, it took me 3 months to figure out what people were saying because I was new to the game like you. And I programmed for 10 years. I just wasn't used, especially to those government high-level acronyms. And two is I want to use them too and explain them because even though you're new to the job or you're trying to get in the industry, a lot of times when you do interviews, HR is dropping those acronyms because they're using that as a test. Even the crazy thing, even for entry level. Because I got not a heated shout out to my man Tiny. We got in those acronyms is part of the language understanding, right? That's part of the baseline, right? The baseline is me using acronyms and you know what those are, right? That's how we communicate. So if you don't understand those acronyms, you don't understand the baseline, then you're not at the level. The crazy thing is they expect entry-level people to go. And that's why I tell a lot of people is that's what search does for you. It gives you a common language to communicate. I'm a search guy and I like search, but I don't overvalue. The reason I like search because that's going to validate my learning and what I'm learning to make sure I'm learning at the proper level, right? I got 4 AWS certs. That doesn't make me an AWS guy. I'm still struggling with AWS, but that gives me a base language to talk to people. That gives me a base language to communicate, right? And I think that's part of gatekeeping too, but that's part you gotta understand the language. So stay on me on that. Stay on me on that, casual. I need to work on that. I need to say it, but then I need to expound on the acronym or expound on the term, like DMZ, right? The military zone, right? In between the internet and the secure net where you pass information, right? This part is less secure than your secure internet because the internet could get to it, right? And see that right there. See those SFTP servers, they're skipping the DMZ and going directly to the back end. I would never do that, right? So I think that's a bad, I'm glad I said that's a bad architecture design. I would have my FTP server go through a proxy server in the middle, then the proxy server talk to the back end, right? So if my FTP servers, depending on how I have that configured, maybe the internet can touch these servers, but if you don't have the right certificate, but that means I could try to brute force attack my back end, right? So also, I got hit me up, message you. Yeah, always, hit me up, man. Hit me up. Definitely hit me up. Like I said, I got hit up my man. I gotta we schedule it. I got to hit my man Fridge up. I'm lacking. I'm gonna go emailing right now. PBO just been busy and trying to get some stuff together, but it's all good. Y'all definitely hit me up, man. So that's all I got. Y'all gonna see me. I'm gonna try to go live a little more. I think I'm gonna do CCPA next, and I think I'm gonna do a little AWS on Sunday at 3. That's when I used to do it before football season gets started. I'll probably do it at 3 for a little while. Hopefully my Colts will be better. Indiana Colts will be better. We got the young quarterback, man. We've been messing the quarterback. Once again, happy Friday. Everybody have a great weekend. Professor Black Ops at gmail.com. If you go to my about page on my YouTube channel, it's in there. Just hit you're not a robot. It should pop up. Just shoot me email. I came here to help people. You'll see me on a lot of other people's channel. And shout out to Struggle Security for the barbecue money. No, I'm PBO going on a dive, man. PBO got to get back in shape. Well, PBO didn't do nothing but eat over the pandemic. But shout out to me, though. We ain't gonna. We got to make sure HR don't get hacked, so they won't lose our. So we can get paid in a timely manner, right? So that's it. So I'm just gonna. That'll be the last topic. Is part of your third party when you buy services. Everybody's buying HR. It's in the cloud. You gotta vet that, because if your HR goes down and it's part of your payroll, if your people can't get paid, what is your backup plan? What is your incident response? What is your disaster recovery, right? That's all part of GRC. So if this movie gets hit and you have bank files and people got to get paid, we used to pay retirees at DOD, right? So if that went down, we had a backup plan, right? So you, as your top functions in business, or you personal, if something happens and you can get to your bank account or your bank account got locked, what will be your backup plan? So that's what I'm gonna give you. Once again, I appreciate everybody for joining me. A lot of my day ones and the new few people coming. You know how we do it. I always reach out, and like I said, you'll see me. I got to figure out what time I'm gonna go live regularly. So I used to do regularly Sunday at 3, so I got to figure out a time. I appreciate everybody for joining. You should see me. Hopefully, I think I'm gonna do Sunday AWS. I think I'm gonna do their AI ChatGPT wannabe service. So I think I'm gonna do that. Once again, Professor Black Ops, please subscribe. Thanks for joining me. You'll see me in those cyber streets. I know a lot of people grinding on that cybersecurity. Don't give up. There's gatekeepers. There's 800,000 open jobs. Reach out to me. We're gonna see if we can help you get one of them. As you see, I'm Chucky. They pay well. That's all I got. Professor Black Ops, please subscribe. I'm out.